Welcome, everybody, to the Advanced Selling Podcast, the longest-running sales training podcast in the history of podcasts. Solo episode time. This is Bryan Neal without my good friend Bill Caskey today. And it is solo episode time. And you know my solo episodes are powered by the Blind Zebra Sales Operating System. Recording this in November of 2024. Just sold out. We're sold out for our December certification class. We're now filling January. So if you get this, I know a lot of you get this feed early. We're filling it up. And if you get it late, you listen to it after the fact, then by all means hit blind-zebra.com and find out the path to become certified in the Blind Zebra Sales Operating System. We're going to be creeping up on about 100 certified coaches serving about 1,000 salespeople in 2025. And we'd love to have you be a part of that. It's also fun because you'll have some of your fellow listeners will be in your class. We've already had some Advanced Selling Podcast listeners come on board. So you may or may not know this as a listener, but Bill and I get hit up all the time to have guests, like a lot. And it's only because we've been podcasting for a long time. And then people hit us up and they get pitched by things. And we mostly say no. Bill and I, when we have guests, we tend to pick them. And so today is one of those days. So I'm really, really happy. I got to see this gentleman speak at a conference where I spoke also in St. Louis, Missouri, back in the spring, and was super, super impressed with what he had to say. So I said, hey, man, come on the podcast. So I'm glad to welcome Chris Dornfeld from Whistle, live from St. Louis today. Hey, Chris, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Good morning, Bryan. Thanks for having me. And I'm humbled by that introduction. I didn't realize it was, so special to be here. I mean, I love listening to you guys, but I think I'm just a sad stand-in for Bill. So thank you.
You're not. No, there's no such thing. Yeah, and we do, and I try to be careful with that. That sounds like kind of a big time move. It's not a big time move. We're just, we're protective of our listeners, and they know that, and they like that. So
sure, great.
And I fact check. Thank God, Chris, you said this in my notes that my group gave me. It was an Field, and I just double checked how to pronounce it. It's Dornfield. Like, no, it's Dornfeld.
Yeah,
share that. Yeah,
as you said, first time ever that's been mispronounced.
Exactly,
never happened before in the history of my last name.
Never get called Bryan Neely. Well, start off. We're going to talk. And by the way, listeners listening to this, so this is going to edge on both sales leadership and the sales people. Before, but we're going to talk about one of the buzziest topics in all of selling, and that is reward and compensation. Salespeople are notorious, and sales teams are notorious for incentive comp plans, spiffs, sales contests. It is just in the DNA of most sales teams. And so start off, Chris, just tell us a little bit of your background and how you came to get interested and make this sort of incentive topic and compensation topic your life's work.
Sure. Well, most recently, my business partner and I, prior to starting Whistle, were running one of the largest incentive companies in the country. And spent a lot of time really digging into that business, the practice of it, and starting to look more at the neuroscience and the data on how do we really motivate people. And the conclusion, long story short, we came to is we're not really using the tools very well, that are in our toolkit, and began to build a technology and company really focused on, how do we just create more value and unlock more value? Because more or less we way overpay to motivate people. I mean, long story short, we estimate probably 3/4 of the budgets that we spend aren't really driving the outcomes. They make us feel good. They give, a lot of presentation, a lot of theater, pomp and circumstance, but ultimately not producing the result. We really wanted to know what actually drives the numbers.
It's awesome. And I love, and if you look at their, at Chris's website, say the website for us, for the listeners.
WeWhistle.com.
WeWhistle.com. Want to make sure I had that right. WeWhistle.com, which is fantastic. What you'll just see some fascinating statistics. More importantly to me, their staff is all PhDs and it's not like a bunch of business people. Yeah, at the core, it looks like. Is that fair?
Yeah, we co-founded the business with a woman with a doctorate in behavioral science.
Yes.
My business partner's background is really building advanced technology, big data, AI. So some really smart people around the table to look at it through a couple different lenses. And as I said, try to really figure out what moves the needle versus what's just theater and what's, we're sort of being sold as valuable.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's say, so I heard a couple things. One, I heard we overpay. So just talk about what the data says about that. What's the sweet spot? What's that perfect point for amount?
Well, I mean, it's highly situational, right? There is sort of no one size fits all, but I'll share a couple things with your listeners that I think are pretty interesting to think about, especially if you're dealing with, incentive comp. One, really understand the behaviors that you're trying to motivate. So we often reward based on simply outcome, which is
Mhm.
important to do. But we also want to, we want to incentivize people to do the right things that produce those outcomes. And more often than not, we'll see a lot of programs where they don't really consider time as this critical factor that it is when it comes to motivating people. So every day you delay a reward or recognition, when I'm trying to motivate someone to motivate a behavior, you lose about 5% of that behavioral impact. So when we do things like at the end of the month, have a safety reward program or employee of the month or, salesperson of the month, and we recognize them and say, great job. We feel good by doing that. We feel the adrenaline, the dopamine from giving, things to people, and they like being recognized. It all feels great, but it's too distant from the behaviors I'm trying to get people to pattern. So you lose a lot of the effect. So you can take that 5%, multiply by 30 days, and realize, you're really almost having no impact with those dollars.
Mm.
And the science all bears this out. It's pretty interesting. The alternative is, as soon as someone's doing something you want them to do, you immediately are like, hey, great job. And we can see this across biology. Anyone who's, trained a pet, I know it's a little simplistic, but there's some truth to it. You can't bring your pet back in a week later and say, hey, don't do that. You made a mess on the floor. It's
Yeah.
completely uncorrelated. You've got about 2 seconds to build that association with that action in the brain, because you're actually going after that positive reinforcement, that dopamine hit the moment it happens. And I'm going to associate that concept of doing that thing makes me feel good to build up the intrinsic motivation.
Hmm.
So that's mostly where we get it wrong. And then a lot of the incentive tools out there are built, I don't know, they're really built to extract value from the process. We worked with a client, they were doing incentives using gift cards.
Yes.
When did some analysis with them, audited, they distribute about $2 million a year in gift cards, pretty large national population of people. And what they found out was about 50% of that money was expiring or wasted or not being used. So incredibly inefficient tool.
Mm.
And we were able to, come in and lower their total cost pretty dramatically and improve the outcome for the business. So
Yeah, double whammy. So if I'm a salesperson listening to this, salespeople are the worst. We're the worst. I'm one of them. You know what I mean? We're never satisfied. Or everyone's trying to screw me with my comp plan.
kind of makes the world go round, though.
It does, doesn't it? But it's the engine, right? We kind of like them a little snarky sometimes, a little.
Yeah.
So they're hearing, wait a second, you telling me that you need to pay us less incentive comp? I don't like this guy, but so clear that up, because that's not necessarily what you're saying. I don't think, right? You're not saying to limit necessarily.
No, in most cases, what we try to, we're trying to go in and operate and sell in and be budget neutral. So we're not typically saying pay more. We're not actually advocating pay less. We're just saying, what you want to do, instead of paying you $1,000 at the end of the month, I want to give you $1,000 spiffs throughout the month.
There you go.
You'll have about 3 times the effect if I'm being constantly rewarded and reinforced. And that was really why we built our technology, was to focus on what we saw as the behavioral driving tools that lead to better outcomes. But yeah, it's not we need to pay people less. We just need to pay them more effectively. And you see this in a lot of incentive design. I don't know if you've been in competitions or large groups and you have leaderboards.
Yes.
You see these things where, like, great. If you study that, you actually want to break that into cohorts. You need to really break that down to help motivate people. Because if you're I don't know, I've been part of sales organizations where I've seen, AEs who have big accounts. They're going to do absolutely nothing, and they're still going to hit the goal for the year and go on the big trip, right? And then you see a guy at the bottom who's grinding away. He's got a half dozen new accounts, creating new business, and he's so far away from that milestone, it becomes demotivating at some point. So you actually have to really look at the population and look at the outcomes you're trying to drive. And we always anchor back to the behaviors. Reward the behaviors. The outcomes, are created from that. So don't just anchor on the outcomes. I mean, the outcomes are important. You need to hit goals, revenue targets, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you really need to help people stay motivated to drive the behaviors. That ultimately will produce a result. Because we've all, you can take a lot of sports analogies from this, I'm sure. There's a lot of effort, a lot of great gameplay that goes on that doesn't result in the right outcome.
Yes.
You don't say, hey, well, you had a crap game because we didn't win. You might have done everything right, played a fantastic game. That still is worth recognizing as well.
Yes. And I'm going to go sports, but then go backwards. That several, and I don't know about Major League Baseball or NBA or NHL, but in NFL, players have incentive contracts, individual incentive contracts for behaviors that they produce on the field that, like you said, lead to win. So number of sacks. So you'll see a player or a team will do a certain thing or get really, at a game, you're like, why do they care about that? Well, the guy's got $100,000 if he gets another sack,
Yeah.
Game. So this is great. So I want the sales leaders, I'm going to stamp something that you said for the sales leaders listening. And if you're a salesperson, please forward this episode to your sales leader and tell them to do what Chris said. You're better off rewarding $100 bills through a month than paying someone $1,000 at the monthly sales meeting. Is that an accurate statement?
Absolutely right.
Yeah. And sales, I'm telling you, because I work with them all the time, sales leaders do not do that. They do not pay as we go. They do the monthly thing. They do exactly what you said, which is funny. They do the scoreboard. And I'm guilty. I even recommend things like this because I'm not an expert in comp. So now I'm learning, and I'm like, I kind of change my tune on this. So
it's funny because it's just what it use the analogy you just described from football.
Yeah, totally.
If the whole team was only motivated on the score,
yes.
How little action that would cause so many other people on the team, right?
Yes.
But if you're saying the behavior every time you're doing that, I'm chalking up that stat at the end of the game. I'm saying great job.
Yes.
I can't wait till the end of the season and say, well, you were only halfway through your stats, so
yes, it's fantastic.
Yep.
And that's what I picture. If I'm a salesperson, I want to forward this to my sales leader. If I'm a sales leader, I'm listening to this episode, and what I'm evaluating going into 2025 from this episode is I'm thinking, okay, what have I been doing, and can I listen to what Chris is saying and modify what I've been doing to A, reward behavior versus outcome, and 2, to do it more frequently. Now let's talk about because I'm pretty sure when I met you in St. Louis, you talked about this, but I just want to fact check. You talked about the gift cards. Then there's cash. And then there's millennials and Gen Zs. And they're like, can you Venmo me, which is sort of cash. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between a cash incentive, a check, and a gift card?
Yeah. So, a check is just a slower vehicle for cash, right? It's just a more cumbersome process that everyone has to go through. I can take a photo from my phone and deal with it, that way, but some people still have to take them to banks. It takes longer to issue. So that time factor we talked about is really important. Checks just work against all of that. Gift cards are just fraught with sort of waste. And it's a whole industry that's designed, to extract money between the giver and the receiver. If you look at Starbucks last year, I think posted on their, quarterly earnings or their annual earnings, there was so much money being made from gift card, breakage or points lost or expiring or whatever. It was like $211 million they claimed last year just off of the program. So it's just a hidden tax we all pay if we use gift cards.
Yeah.
And cash is really, not only is it shown to be more motivating, it's much more flexible. And it's frankly what people want. We did a survey of people in the field, and we're asking, what factor would you like to receive your reward in? And about 90%, about 9 out of 10 say, we'd prefer cash. I don't, company swag's fine, or little mementos, but in this day and age when I need to, go buy some groceries, or I want to take my family to dinner, or, put gas in my car.
Yeah.
The $100 is just a little easier for me to use, and it creates more value for me in my life than, accumulating points to buy an overpriced toaster at some point. That's just a waste.
We see this too. So we see tickets. I get clients that do tickets to the swag store. And like you said, it's like nice, but is it really modifying or changing the behavior?
Now, company swag is important from like a tribalism standpoint, so it might move the needle on retention, which is an important factor for a lot of companies. To feel like you're part of the team. Yeah. But when it comes to a motivating form for behavior, it's pretty low. It's pretty low. Only about 1.5% of people said that's their preferred form of. Think about that. 99% of people don't want swag when it comes to, something to help them be motivated.
Yeah, interesting. Talk about group incentive. Sales leaders ask me this a lot. They're like, should I do a team goal? Like if the whole team hits, we win, or should it stay individual or a combo? What's the data say about that?
I think the data, at least I've read, is pretty mixed. It's a little situational. Again, how dependent are you on the team? What's the role? I think in general, you see a lot of hybrids where you'll have both the behaviors of the individual, being rewarded in the moment. And then you might also have team goals, which is really more tied to an incentive structure saying, we hit our number for the month or the quarter, everyone benefits. I think it's especially important. There's a lot of dependencies. on other people, that everyone feels like they're, part of that team, and that's happening together. So it's a little bit of sort of the use case, but I think they're good. I think they're pretty impactful.
Yeah.
And I think the science bears that out.
Interesting. It'd be interesting to measure that, to test that. And then to the people listening here, try rewarding as you go to the team versus like, okay, let's do a quarterly
That's right.
deal. Yeah. Just
That's right. Time is the big factor most people don't do, right?
Yeah.
Right. And typically what you see in an advanced incentive program, a little bit of layering, meaning some team, maybe it's some company even, but that's a bigger, wheel to measure and sort of figure out. But the gap most people have is that really timely, in the moment, you had a great meeting, or I just saw you present. That was incredible. Let me send you a lunch. Here's $20. Those moments of saying, great, I'm going to be motivated to get better and better at that.
Yeah.
That action, that behavior, that's what ultimately drives success of the team and the organization.
Interesting. Because I could even look at, if I'm managing a sales team, obviously outbound behavior drive. So it could be outbound touches, reaches, calls, visits, whatever, meetings held. But I could reward that next morning for the day before or something like that, and say, hey, I just want to call out Chris. Chris had 8 demos yesterday. So Chris, I'm Venmoing you $100 right now.
Yeah. And you can even take that a step further. I mean, we've started to do this in other industries where we've built integrations into their system. So as soon as you log that information somewhere, because almost all this gets tracked in, Salesforce, HubSpot. I mean, whatever your, flavor of CRM is, or sales tracking tool. And you can actually automate triggers. So as soon as you hit that, I can even send you a coffee just saying, well, I know you entered in, you hit a goal of 3 new calls a day, and your phone can immediately just go, ding, great job. Here's the number. So that's real time, right? That's in the moment. I mean, that's ultimately what we're after, is because now I feel like, oh, that's cool. The next three, or whatever your goal is, you want to set. It's one of the nice things is, as I said, we, not to be too self-promoting, but as we built the technology, we want to be able to tie it into other things, because we wanted that to happen in real time. And you can get little dollars, those little gestures go a real long way to motivating people. That's just saying, hey, appreciate that. Here's $8. You finish this task. So your phone, in theory, could be going off throughout the day.
Right.
And this is just a game plan taken from social media, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at that constant dopamine hit of saying, well, I want to reinforce that behavior. It's why social media has become so addictive. We're just trying to provide some similar tools, right, in the sales organization that allowed everyone to be more successful.
Yes.
It's all timing.
That's fantastic. And I love the automation that your tool allows, like you said, if I hit on my 21st call of the day, then boom, I get lunch the next day, and it's automated. It's awesome.
And you can design some pretty cool stuff even with small dollars, where you can say, great, your first 5 calls, maybe that's one goal, and then you get to 10 or 15 and you can level up. And so you can actually be really creative with how you automate that. Again, so it's easy to administer at scale, but it can become highly motivating to people, because man, it's tough sometimes. We've all been through it, where you've got to sit there and, knock out sales actions, and you're not getting the result you want, right? But you still have to go through the motion. It's like the training, and in practice.
True.
It's tough.
It can be a grind. And I love that, because that's what, if we hear, and we have mixed bag of like industries. We have some, a few like software where they're like banging it. We don't do a ton of that work, but even people that are on the road or outbound, it's a grind. And people ask all the time, how do I stay? I need motivated, man. It's another quarter, another week, and here we go. So it's really cool.
Yeah, no, that's right. And keep hitting on those behaviors, keep doing it with a high degree of frequency, recognize people. Not everything even has to be a reward, but it does help, right?
Yeah.
So, just staying really actively engaged for the sales leaders out there is really important to keep people motivated. Because you also just don't know what they're going through. And, so helping stay on top of them, I've found to be very successful.
That's great. Last question, then I want to let the group know a little bit about how to get a hold of you. So last question is, where does experiential or non-cash compensation play a role here? I'm a big life experience guy. Like, instead of giving my kids, stuff for Christmas, we do that, but they always get an experience, a life experience. People give away trips, like you said, to Cabo for the President's Club. Where do just go generally non-cash compensation, PTO days, things like that, where fit in the scheme?
They're valuable. They're less valuable in terms of those day-to-day motivating factors and behaviors. They're a nice thing to do. I think they strike a chord more with camaraderie and experience and building a relationship, which again, to me, that speaks to the factor of retention. The number one reason people start looking for a new job is they don't feel valued or appreciated by their boss. The other factor is, do I have a sense of community and connection, into the people I work with? So those experiences are important from that standpoint, right? They make us feel really good. There's not a lot of evidence about how effective they are at motivating those daily behaviors, right? Again, the factor of time erodes their impact. And so we see a lot of president's trips and other things. And I could do a whole show on just, the inefficiency of those. And as I said, it seems like always the same group of people get them. They're usually, because they're tied to big accounts, the system feels a little gamed. So they're great, right, to go on, but from motivating a population of salespeople, I don't know. There's a lot of risk there too if they're not really done effectively. But the dirty secret of the industry is that's also where the industry makes its most margin. So the incentive industry talks a lot about, these are fantastic. It's their highest margin sales item they can sell you.
Interesting. Cat's out of the bag. Now we know deep dark secrets of the incentive comp industry. That's great. Well, this is awesome. So if you're listening to this, actions to take, sales leaders, get the incentive down to behaviors. Time is the trigger. Cash is king is what I'm hearing from Chris today. And reevaluate how you've been doing these kind of like spiffs, monthly things, that sort of, and get it in real time. And then if you need help, Chris's group can help you with this. Chris, tell the group and the listeners if they're interested in contacting you and seeing a demo of your program, how they do that.
Sure. You can shoot me an email, chris@wewhistle.com, right? It's probably the easiest way. Go to our website, wewhistle.com. Check it out. A lot of good resources. There's a whole lot of blogs and information, that's universrsally valuable. And reach out. We're happy to help, and keep an eye out. We're often speaking at different seminars or workshops, and great way to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I highly recommend send this to your sales leader this episode. Sales leaders, get in touch with Chris. They've got some really, really cool mechanisms and data that can help you get 25 rolling in the right direction. So, okay.
Love
Chris,
it.
thanks for being here, man. So that's it for this edition of the Event Selling Podcast. Reminder, we're powered by Blind Zebra Sales Operating System. We are constantly now filling our certification classes with listeners like you. So go to blind-zebra.com and you can start a conversation, learn how you can get certified, and sit with some of your fellow podcast listeners and get certified by the head coach, which happens to be me. I'd love to meet you live. That's it. See you next time on the Advanced Selling Podcast.